feeling good, Charlie? Is it good sunshine? Is it spring? Yeah, baby. You happy dog? Hey homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm, or welcome back. Today in the kitchen we are making Salisbury steak. And this is something that I don't do a lot of, but I tend to buy meat in bulk. And from a few years ago, we split a whole cow between 4 different people. And I ended up with some round steaks. And a round steak comes from the back of the cow. The round is actually the back, hip, and leg of the cow. It's not the most tender cut of meat for sure. Most of the round you usually either do really thinly sliced or you do a long cook on it and then shred it, so pot roast and that kind of thing. But it is a really nice, lovely, beefy flavor, and they tend to also be less expensive at the grocery store. Just a quick kind of Google search on round steaks. Beef is not cheap right now, period, but somewhere between $8 and $10 a pound, which is quite a bit less than what you're going to be paying for a nice filet or a nice sirloin or something like that. Also, if you're familiar with cube steak is usually made from the round of the beef. And that's just basically taking a piece of that meat and then poking tons of little holes in it to tenderize it. So a cube steak is that. Salisbury steak can also be made with ground beef. And this recipe originated with an old Alton Brown recipe. And he does use ground beef in this. So this also works with ground beef. I had these round steaks rolling around in the bottom of my freezer and decided to use them up. And so we went ahead with that. But Salisbury steak, Swiss steak, they're all in that same general grouping of taking an inexpensive, tough cut of meat and doing a long, slow braise, so a wet cooking method on them. And they get tender and they've got a lot of great beefy flavor. And so it's a really nice way to do a Sunday dinner, Saturday dinner, or something you can throw in the crock pot and have cooking all day and then come home and eat on a weeknight. But a really lovely comfort food as we're finally coming out of winter and into spring. Let's get started. So we're going to start out here with some dredging seasoned flour. So this is half a cup of all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper, and then just a dash of an all-purpose seasoning that I have on hand that has garlic and onion bits and other things in it. I'm going to mix that well. And then I'm going to dredge my round steaks in this flour mixture. And this was about 1.25 pounds, I think, for both of these. So each one of these is around 0.5 pound. And they were fairly thick. I could have, if I wanted to fiddle with it, I could have tried cutting those lengthwise so that they were a thinner piece, but I was not feeling it. And so we just did the bigger chunk here. So get everything nicely dredged and then shake off the excess. So you don't want a ton of extra flour on there. And this flour is going to help make the gravy later. So some of it's going to come off of that meat and it's going to go into the sauce and give us a beautiful, tasty gravy. Interesting history on Salisbury steak. It evidently originated in the Civil War period by a doctor who believed that a meat-heavy diet was super healthy. So look at that. We've come full circle. If any of you have looked at this internet ad for this little sprayer/pourer of oil, I succumbed to the ads and I ordered one off of Amazon and it leaks. It drips down the side every time I use it. So not recommended. But in this pan, I've got a couple tablespoons of avocado oil. You could use olive as well. And then a tablespoon of butter just to give it a little bit of extra flavor there. Getting that all melted together. And then I'm going to brown my round steaks on both sides. And I don't want to crowd the pan. This is a big 12-inch cast iron skillet. I'm giving these about 4 minutes per side. And I want a nice brown coating on there. If you had bacon grease, that would also be very tasty in terms of things to fry this in. And then I'm going to remove these to a plate, set aside, and then in those drippings, I'm going to saute some mushrooms, and some onions. And so this was probably one small onion. It was just some pieces and bits that I had rolling around in my fridge. And then about a pint of mushrooms. This was a mix of button mushrooms and small cremati mushrooms. And then a clove of garlic. And I'm just gonna, on medium heat, so not super hot here, I am deglazing this pan, so I'm getting all of the little flour bits up off the bottom and then getting those mushrooms to release a lot of their liquid and the onions to soften up. This is gonna take 7 or 8 minutes to saute this down into a very lovely topping. And then going into the sauce here, I've got 3/4 of a cup of red wine and also some Worcestershire sauce, some Dijon mustard, and some beef stock. And you could use chicken stock, that would work too. I'm working my way through a thing of better than bouillon beef stock, and so I used beef stock in this, equal amounts of wine and beef stock. I'm gonna start out with the wine. I'm gonna use that to deglaze the pan again, getting up any flavorful brown bits on the bottom there, and also to cook off a good chunk of that alcohol. So we wanna reduce this down a little bit. And then a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. This is a homemade Worcestershire sauce. If you guys are interested, I have a video on that. And then a teaspoon of Dijon mustard, also homemade, also have a video on that. Isn't it funny how these things all come together? And then here's our beef stock going in. And then I'm gonna nestle these steaks down into this sauce. And this is the braising liquid. You could do this on the stove on a really low back burner and just keep it covered. I went ahead and cooked this in the oven. And I think I had my temperature a little too low on this. I was at 225 because I was combining various recipes for round steak when I was making this. I probably should have come up to 300. And I ended up braising it in the oven, flipping it over about every half an hour for about an hour and a half. And these were not falling apart tender, partly because of the thickness of the steak here. It's a fairly thick steak, but it was nicely tender and really flavorful by the time it came out of the oven. And then if you wanted to do a similar recipe, you can do this without the mushrooms and the onions and just make a nice brown gravy. And that is kind of a country style steak, or you can use tomatoes and make a Swiss steak. So they are all variations on a theme, which is taking the inexpensive, tough back end of the cow, so those round roasts, and braising them in a liquid over time until they're nice and tender. But this is comfort food at its finest. I don't know if you guys grew up with frozen TV dinners with Salisbury steak. I definitely did. And then in some diners, you still find this on a diner menu because you cook it slow and low in an oven and it's ready whenever you need it, and it's fork tender and delicious. So here's the finished product, and you can see that that gravy has thickened up there very nicely. I'm checking for tenderness. It was getting pretty late in the day. I could have gone another half an hour on this, but we were hungry and wanted to eat, and it was tender enough to easily eat. And there it is, all served up with some lovely homemade mashed potatoes as well. Give this recipe a try, Tribe. Thanks for watching, Tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.